Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me here today with you here in Warsaw, and also for those of you following us online. So my name is Ebba Hallersjo Hult. I don't have a medical background, and I don't have a health economic background. I'm just very, how would you say, I dare to challenge also myself in these challenging times. So I have a background from social sciences, and in that case also as international business development. I co-founded nearly 4 years ago a Swedish innovation hub in cancer called Vision Zero Cancer, and together with the Swedish Network of Genomic Medicine Sweden and SciLife Lab, which is our infrastructure for advancing diagnostics, we created a testbed, a system demonstrator to help accelerate the implementation of precision medicine and cancer in routine care. So it's a multi-stakeholder partnership, and I'm part of running it, seeing what all the different components that we need to bring together to actually make this to routine. And through those initiatives, we also had the opportunity to shape this Dutch Nordic Clinical Trial Network with Professor Hans Gelderblom and Åslaug Helland that we heard earlier today. And many more people, and through that also then creating this precision networks funded by the European Union, PCM for EU, and Primrose Consortium. So orchestrating and seeing all the values of the different things. So I would also like to send some acknowledgements to two of my colleagues in the Swedish consortium and also in the European. Associate Professor Katarina Sten Karlsson and Oskar Frisell from the Swedish Institute for Health Economics, who have helped me also to understand the notions, of course, that we all have to have for understanding the health economics parts and the road to reimbursement, also as highlighted by Dr. Åslaug Helland in her presentation as one of the key components in their networks and consortium in Norway to enable access to diagnostics, to trials, and eventually the reimbursement to make this sustainable and affordable. Now I have to see here, so switch there. So PCM for EU, this project is funded then by the European Union, is a response to delivering on Europe's Beating Cancer Plan and the flagship initiative on precision diagnostics for all. So this is really about creating the conditions for equal implementation so that all the citizens who need it will have, by Agenda 2030 ambitions, accurate and individualized prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and follow-up for the best and greatest possible quality of life. So I think that is what's driving us in our initiatives, and the Drupal clinical trials is a means to achieve that. And to achieve that, you also need to have the health economic component into it. So, thinking of implementation science as a driver of innovation. This is to quote the Lancet Oncology Commission on the ground shot, that we need more follow-through in Europe, not only the breakthroughs. And I think a lot within precision oncology is still considered like a moonshot or a breakthrough, but a lot of it is already routine. But we just have to make sure that it's implemented in an effective and affordable way. Because no innovation improves patient care and outcomes without navigating its way through the health system. It's on the regulatory side, it's the health economics showing the value, but it's also, just as what we mentioned here before, having the right competences to actually deliver everything from the test to the care and to the follow-up. And so implementation and to scale up, and these European initiatives are of course a way to do that, are very important to strengthen the health systems, and they will in the end determine whether an innovation is affordable and equitable. So this is equally important of course for all the pharmaceutical companies, medical technology companies, and others dedicated to healthcare to make sure also through trials that what is actually being invested in is something that we need. and that we can afford ultimately. So it's on the other side of the coin, so to speak, and those aspects have to balance well going forward. And to do that, we have also created a sister initiative that we call Primrose, which is about pragmatic clinical trials. And that is also funded by the European Union through the Cancer Mission. And there we take an holistic approach, and I think you will hear a little bit more about it in a moment from Professor Hans Gelderblom, about creating these innovation ecosystems in each country according to our local possibilities, but also as a family, a network, so that we can together make sure that we can drive those initiatives required so that we can provide the different options for patients in need, but ultimately making sure that we have an access that is affordable and equitable and sustainable in our countries. And this picture just shows sort of the ecosystem, all the different aspects and the sort of what's in it for all type of stakeholders. For patients, for instance, being part of such trials means with new cohorts provides more options for treatment. And from a societal perspective, of course, we can talk about the early access to effective and well-tolerated precision medicine in a cost-effective and sustainable way. For pharma, it's a predictable way to introduce new precision medicine products and services into the healthcare systems, and so forth. But one of the key components is then the cost effectiveness in a real-world setting. So the economic case then for precision medicine. So the advancement of precision medicine into routine clinical practice has been highlighted in many forums during several years now and in many, many publications. And it is really on the national and international agenda for healthcare policy. We very often hear about that it's too costly, we can't afford it. I think what we are doing together in these, this community of trials and PCM for use to prove a lot of it is affordable, and especially if we can make sure that we can give the right treatment to the right patient, and also make sure that we don't have a lot of waste and unnecessary costs in the health systems in addition to unnecessary suffering. So having trials and having situations where we can actually prove it as we go along, the better for our cases. Because the principal barrier for the payers and regulators is, of course, to see how should they value, how should they measure, and of course in relationship to something else. So then a few notions then about health economics. So economists, they often like to talk about the marketplace with a thing of a supply and demand. And here's a typical marketplace where you will see that they meet and they match and you have a perfect equilibrium. That is usually not the case for the healthcare. Because then, to some extent, we know who are the patients and who are the ones that we can address and that we can afford. But many of them we don't know about. So what about the unmet demand? How do we deal with that? And that's where health economics come into play. So the challenge is that our payers and the reimbursement agencies or health insurance companies, depending on the health system we're in, is of course how to prioritize among the different needs from different persons and population groups. And that is the main thing to consider also when deciding on alternative treatments, and also how to evaluate new possibilities. So in general, we do have a situation where in the health economics, that meaning then that the demand for healthcare services is infinite, but budgets are finite. We don't have endless resources. So usually the healthcare systems, everything fits neatly into the box that you can see in the center here with we can address and attend the different patient groups that we have, whether it's, of course, cancer patients, but also in general, also other diseases or comorbidities, and it's from children to to the elderly. And we have to find ways of needs to allocate the resources to maximize the output and get as much health extracted from every zloty or euro that we have. And we need to make this evaluation. Because the demand is increasing, and we will always see more and more people needing more. And it's in a tsunami of wealth in that. And this system becomes overcrowded. So how do we prioritize? More wanting to entry, more possibilities with needs. Today, even more become chronic diseases, as cancer, or totally be curable. So we will also end up in a situation where some of them will fall out of the box. How do we make it affordable? And this is where the case comes in for the regulators, and from the reimbursement perspective, how do we assess so that new possible treatments will actually be more effective than what we already have at hand? And that's a little bit tricky when it comes to precision medicine, as we have very small cohorts often how to stratify and how to assess the value. And these type of trials are then a very, very good way of handling those questions. So when we look at economic evaluations, like the decision problems, just to give you a very quick overview in this respect from a Swedish example. In Sweden, we have in our Medical Act 3 principles for healthcare delivery, and it's based on the equality and to care, and also to the right in needs and so forth. So it's when you have a limited budget and you have different persons with different needs, and you have how should you actually prioritize between them, whether it's a younger person with mild symptoms with a low risk of mortality with a certain cost, to a person that retired with a severe condition with a moderate risk of mortality, or a pensioner retired with mild symptoms and low risk mortality. These are the kind of situations where you might see the kind of struggles that our health technology assessment bodies are working on, and the regulators to define whether or not to reimburse a treatment. And a lot is now, of course, the case when it comes to cancer medicines. And I don't know exactly how you face it in your countries, but we often see this and we discuss it a lot in media. Of course, it's for many patient groups, it's unfair. And how can it be differences between different regions, or a drug has been approved by the EMA, but it's still not reimbursed in our country, and so on. So these are the parts of the debates that we need to deal with. And so this is just to explain that the kind of challenges that healthcare economists are dealing with, so that we can see on where we fit in, what we work on. So economic evaluations then are based on lots of different data from quality of life aspects. It's from clinical trials. They gather also from cost and resource use data, and epidemiology, of course, data from registries, demographic data, and of course expert opinion from peer reviews, etc., and the literature, and also, of course, making assumptions. And they always have to find the comparator for making these decision analytic models. And the comparator is in standard care. It's quite easy because it's usually based on a certain disease and with a lot of information already, and it's often based on one type of target drug that many can follow, and larger cohorts. But with precision medicine and with the stratified, this comparator becomes a bit more elusive. And that is also why it's so important to involve with the health technology assessment and health economics experts also in the designing of the trials and the protocols, so the one together can work out ways of making sure that we can gather this data and make it easier also for reimbursement cases. And this is just to show an example what this comparator is for us. If we would like to buy a house, we can always measure a bigger house or a smaller house, depending on the neighborhood where we want to stay. And we can always use one criteria like the cost per square meter as a comparator, we don't have that in precision oncology. So this is a little bit about understanding the type of challenges that our payers are dealing with and how we can then help them. So that we can make sure that the right type of evidence is generated, and especially when we now are being able to share more data and cohorts, which is the ambition over these coming years. So to estimate cost and health outcomes, it's to define the comparator. It's really the most cost-effective of available and clinically relevant treatment options that will be considered as the comparative alternative. So it's not against placebo when you're looking into precision medicine. It's like the alternative to something that was already being used. So we have to be smart in thinking that when we're designing trials. And then that's where we're coming to the clinical trials and their role then in economic evaluations with some promises and limitations. So in general, as we said, the challenge is that trials are usually not, whether it's investigator or sponsor-related, initiated, not usually designed with consideration of transferability to demonstrate the value, like the economic valuation or health technology assessment. And they're usually more used as a primary source for efficacy and safety. And also, of course, treatment efficacy estimated in clinical trials links to more of health-related quality of life outcomes. And data collected can, of course, be used to inform decision analytic models. So this is sort of the general panorama. And in the limitations, then, we can see that in the design is often more controlled. We might not always have the right then endpoints transferable. It's often then with the small cohorts and number of enrolled patients. So this is important to take into consideration then when designing the trials, and also for this understanding. And this field of evidence and knowledge is also increasing, and we have dedicated persons also within PCM4EU in the work for these years, and also within Primrose, and in addition to health economists being involved in the different trials. And I think we will have a little bit more now from Hans Gelderblom from the Netherlands. Have you also been very successful in demonstrating value, so you can have risk-sharing models and with reimbursement from the payers. And this, from a systematic, taking many of these repurposed drugs into a systematic routine care instead of just sort of compassionate use. And it's, of course, a systematic way of making sure that we're getting more evidence. So some challenges is, as we talked about, to make sure that we understand the relevant comparator scenario, so we can design from that. We know we have more complex patient pathways from the diagnostic side, what type of tests, and also heterogenic in that respect, and what type of outcome measures to assess. And also the clinical challenges, as we said just before here now, the key is, of course, the diagnostics, and also within the countries, the availability of diagnostic tests, what kind of tests, and also the resources to analyze, and how you should organize that. And also, of course, then it can be cost for dealing with it, so, because you cannot just evaluate like a drug, but it's the whole component of diagnostics and drugs. So it's important to take in mind then as key components then this with the reimbursement models, patient stratification, the rapid technological development that we're living in, and also how we can work with the biased effectiveness estimates. So I'll just show a little bit of a case on how can you go about these challenges also then while designing a trial. And that is really to bring the experts with you from the very beginning. So in Sweden, we have a drop-like clinical trial called the Megalith that was initiated, the design for that in 2017. And over the years, it's been established at 2 sites. We have in Sweden 7 university hospitals, and they are then working in networks in 6 healthcare regions. So they also support and work together with more regional hospitals where we also have cancer care. We have comprehensive cancer centers or clinical cancer centers embedded into our general university hospitals. This first trial is now being redesigned to adapt for more to make it national, to have all the sites wanting to join. We have created that, and also to align even better with the DRUP protocol and the IMPRESS protocol, but also as years have evolved, making sure that we make it relevant for the payers and also for the pharma industry, of course, to want to participate. And we see also now the possibilities of adding more evidence generation when it comes to diagnostics and also advancing new methods. So we did create a national network. We worked a lot with our colleagues from the Netherlands, from Norway, from Denmark and Finland to also boost and engage the stakeholders in Sweden to actually carry out a national trial, because we are very much of a regional healthcare system, and it's like, okay, what's in it for me, who should lead it, and so on. So it's been a nice process now for several months. So we started with national meetings with all the stakeholders on board to discuss the different needs and perspectives from the regulatory side, from our medical products agency, from the reimbursement agency, but also from the pharmaceutical industry and patient associations and many more, from the precision diagnostics. So we formed a design group run by with the key people from the Swedish National Network for the Clinical Trial Units in Oncology, so that we would, from the beginning, making sure that the ownership would rest with the clinical trials units and the oncologists. And then together with specialists in diagnostics and the pathologists and geneticists, also adding into this design. So we have sort of continued to evolve and adapt it to a Swedish study, but also from the beginning involving and updating to the latest available knowledge from the healthcare economic perspective, and so that we can design and also verify new endpoints that we think can be useful not only for Sweden but for Poland and for other countries within the European Union. So we have now just released our synopsis. We have just selected which of the 7 sites will be the coordinating site, and we will make that public next week. We've had project support along the way, so it's been a lot of orchestration and having everybody on board in a co-design process. And now then the final protocol writing will start, and we are also then organizing special innovation counseling with the Medical Products Agency for combination treatments, already being inspired by the DRUP attack, so that we can see, could we from the beginning go in that direction. So this, I'm not going to read this for you, but this is just to show that from the synopsis we have our chapter on cost effectiveness, and that is really that we say that to ensure that the findings of this national PCM study, Sweden, we haven't put a name yet to it, can be implemented into routine care, it is necessary to assess the cost effectiveness of the protocol of using treatments where the trial results indicate a favorable risk-benefit ratio for at least some patients. And then we continue with what I just mentioned before, as the healthcare system has finite resources subjected to prioritization, it is imperative that all novel interventions like drugs, diagnostics, treatment regimens improve health outcomes at a cost that is both acceptable and affordable in relation to all other healthcare provided within the system. So this is sort of the notion for designing this trial, and I think we will see that more and more going forward, because if we from the beginning can put the end in mind, say what is that we want to achieve for our patients and for our society, what can be affordable, then we can also try to design and tailor in smart ways, and also put the right demands in our discussions with the private companies on what trials to do in countries and what do the system need going forward. And we think also being part of developing models within our trials that we can sort of identify gaps that we do have for what are the key drivers of cost effectiveness of intervention, and to pinpoint where are the largest data gaps. We think we can also support in a better and more widespread introduction and support the decision making so that we can help alleviate some of the uncertainties that the healthcare prioritization decisions require. Because this is, I don't think it's a common problem for all of us. We have a very high budget constraints, but so much demands and opportunities. So again, the comparator alternative is elusive in precision diagnostics, so a key way of solving it is to co-design, co-create and drive this type of clinical trials. So it's really about taking a pragmatic approach and make sure that we also combine data from different types of registries so that we get the clinical information, but also other from the patient themselves, of course, and also so we can see to the overall quality of life aspects. So in our synopsis, in addition to a lot of clinical endpoints and prompts and so on, we do have several objectives related to health economics assessment and the cost effectiveness to prove the value. So we also set the exploratory object to investigate cost effectiveness and also created exploratory endpoints. So that our aim is to be able to have a toolbox of solutions that can be used for other trials, but also for other countries wanting to set up something similar. We have learned so much from our colleagues in the Netherlands, in Norway, in Denmark, in Finland, and also from our first trial in Sweden. So we want to really leverage on all that, but also give back from what we can do. And so to summarize, in principle, healthcare assessments, they use the same methods to analyze the cost effectiveness in precision medicine. But the important thing is then to make sure that we need to show the effects of precision medicine compared to standard of care. So designing and implementing trials into routine care in a way that our healthcare systems can afford. That is what we need to find out together. Thank you.